It's week 1 of our Keto Weekly Meal Prep where I'll show you how to save time and money in the kitchen while eating delicious keto recipes. This week we're going to make barbecue kielbasa, pizza meatloaf, low-carb chili, taco pizza, burgers, and Salisbury steak with gravy. I hope you enjoy. When I start meal prep on Sunday, I will put something in the crock pot, and that is just so that my hands are free to do other things while this cooks. So I'm making chili this week. I have 1 cup of diced peppers in here, 1 tablespoon and a half of diced green onion, and 1 pound of ground beef that's already cooked. And then I'm gonna add in this from Aldi. It's organic diced tomatoes. The entire can has 35 carbohydrates. And there's the ingredients. Instead of adding more tomatoes to make the liquid, I'm gonna add beef broth. You can add chicken broth too. And this will help make it stretch so that you're not adding a bunch of carbohydrates, but you're getting more substance. And then I'll add in 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, and some salt and pepper. I generally will add a whole container of this beef broth, but I do need some for another recipe that I'm making today, and so I'll just add the remaining container after I do that recipe. So that would probably equate to about 3 cups or so in this recipe. So here's what it looks like all mixed up. Keep in mind that green peppers are less carbs than colored peppers, and so that's why I added the majority of them green. Here's the consistency. It's more runny, but if you like it thicker, you can always add glucomannan, which is what I'm going to be using in another recipe, or you could use some gelatin. And I wouldn't add a lot all at once, maybe just test it out for yourself, or you could add some extra ground beef and do 2 pounds and stretch it that way instead. While the chili cooks, we're going to make some keto taco pizzas. I love that this recipe for the crust is simple and easy. It has a nice crunch, unlike the fathead pizza that's made with cheese. It's also dairy-free and egg-free. And I'll have a recipe in the description for a homemade taco seasoning because the stuff in the store normally does have sugar in the ingredients. So Ethan is mixing up the crust here. He's using aluminum-free baking powder. And there's almond flour in there. You just mix up all the ingredients into a paste-like texture. These are also awesome for freezing and rebaking later on, so that's something that I do often so that I don't have to make the same recipe over and over again. I'll just double or quadruple this batch and make a big pizza. And you can also leave out the taco seasoning and add like oregano and basil to make a regular pizza crust. Or you can cut these up and make them as chips for salsa and guacamole and stuff like that.
This is what it should look like when it's done. And then this is what it should look like when you do it.
After you roll it all out, what you can do is use a cup as a cookie cutter and cut out your circles.
Okay guys, and then so you can see it can make 9 bigger ones and 3 little ones.
While that's in the oven, I'm going to prep any of the topping that I would like for the taco pizza.
So we cook these at 425 degrees for 10 minutes. And then you can add on whatever toppings you like. Cheese, black olives, lettuce, tomatoes,
avocados,
cucumbers.
So just so you guys can see the texture of these, I broke one in half. They're pretty crispy. So you could also use this recipe for chips and just leave out the taco seasoning and add like salt to it.
We hope you like this recipe.
Here's the kielbasa we'll be doing today. It has 2 total carbs for 2 ounces. And I'm just gonna slice it up. After you get done cutting it up, throw it in a pot to boil, drain off the water, and have it with whatever condiments you like. I make my own homemade barbecue sauce, which I will leave a recipe below for that, but these are good low carb or no carb options. This one I found on Amazon, so I'll have a link below for that if you want to try it out. Otherwise, I think they started carrying these Hughes at Walmart as well. For 2 tablespoons, there's 2 carbs, and here's the ingredients. And then Walden Farms seemed to have an aftertaste for me. I did not care for it at all. I basically kept it so that I could do some marinating in it maybe, but there's no carbs in this one. This is what we used to buy, Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. After looking at this, it's basically sugar. Total carbohydrates 18, 16 sugars, and the first ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. So that is a no-go. So we're gonna make a pizza meatloaf, and what I've done is I've put 1 pound of ground turkey, 1 pound of ground beef, and the reason that I used 1 pound of ground turkey and 1 pound of ground beef instead of all of one is because the fat content in ground beef is generally higher, depending on the kind that you get. But what I'm gonna do is when I bake this, I'm gonna put it in the oven for 425 degrees, and the total time that I cook it is for 60 minutes, but I'm gonna drain off the fat halfway through. Here's the spices that I add into the meatloaf mixture before baking. You could also add in thyme or whatever else you like. I took a bag of pork rinds. I got these at Aldi. This is 3.5 ounces. I'm gonna use half the bag. And what I did was I put the pork rinds in here. And what the pork rinds will do is add a lightness to the meatloaf or to the pizza loaf. Instead of adding any sort of crackers or grains or high carbs, pork rinds do not have any carbs, and so they're a great substitute. And in this case, you can't even taste them because there's so many other flavors going on. Now, in order to bind this together, you can add an egg. I am allergic to egg whites, and so what I do is I add a flax egg, and that just helps to combine everything to make sure that it's not falling apart like a burger would or something like that. I generally buy vegetables only when they're on sale. So what I have done is I pulled out some green pepper because my husband likes green pepper on his pizza. The kids don't like it. So what I'm gonna do is after I get this meat combined and put in the pan and I bake it, I'm gonna add the toppings that everybody likes. So half of the pizza meatloaf will be toppings that my husband likes. A quarter would be for me and what I like on mine, and then a quarter, the kids would split a quarter too. Since I normally buy veggies on sale, I just freeze the green peppers that I get, and then I can pull them out later for recipes like this where I only need a little bit. I love that I can separate out what everybody likes in this one too, especially since my son has allergies and I do as well. This makes it really easy to put on what each person likes on their pizza. Time to get your hands dirty. You just want to combine everything really good. And you can smell I generally don't like pork rinds. I hated them before I started keto, but when you start combining this, you can really smell them. They also have different flavors, and I've added in barbecue flavored pork rinds for different recipes, which is really good. But for this one, I just use the original because it takes on the flavor of whatever you're combining it with. And now I'm just gonna press it into the pan. And this is gonna be a Tuesday recipe for us because I work longer on Tuesdays. And so what I do is I'll press it all into the pan. And in order to have a fresh meal, instead of having leftovers all week, I prep this on Sundays and then I just keep it in the fridge, keep it covered. And on Tuesday, about an hour before the kids are ready to eat dinner, I throw it in the oven, and then it's a nice fresh meal. So now that I have it all even, when I'm ready to cook it, I'll cook it at 425 degrees for a total time of 1 hour. I'll take it out of the oven halfway through and dump off the fat that's in it. And that just helps so that it cooks faster and it also makes it less soggy, since those pork rinds take on some of that fat. After it's done cooking for an hour, what I do is I pull it out, make sure that it's completely cooked through. This is a 9x13 pan. But I make sure that it's completely cooked through, and then I add my toppings afterward. So it's just gonna cook as a meatloaf initially, and then afterward you add your pizza toppings. After I pull this out of the oven for the first hour, I'm gonna add the toppings, but underneath the toppings I'll add some sauce. You guys can get just normal pizza sauce. Just be careful that you don't smother it, because tomato paste is tomato based, obviously, and it is higher in carbs. So you just want to get that flavor without adding a ton of carbs. All right, so that meal is all prepped. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we're gonna make some Salisbury steak in gravy. This was one of my favorite meals growing up because it just says comfort to me. So what I'm gonna do is take 2 pounds of ground beef, put it in a bowl. Now I took 2 small plates so that I can press the Salisbury steak. If you guys have a press, that's even more helpful. But this is an easy way to do it that doesn't cost a ton of money. You just take 2 saucers, cover it with parchment paper, and then when you're ready to press your Salisbury steak, they come off really easy and you can put them on the grill or put them on a plate to prep ahead of time. So with the 2 pounds of ground beef, we're gonna add in a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, or whatever mustard you have. I just eyeball it. A tablespoon of parsley. And this is half of a bag of crushed pork rinds. The bag was 3.5 ounces. Then we'll add some salt, some pepper to taste. We'll combine everything and then I'll show you how to press them. Now generally when I think about Salisbury steak, they're not in burger form. So they're not perfectly circle, they're more oval shaped. And so to get that sort of look, I just make them into a cylinder type shape like this. See? And then I add it to my parchment paper, put a parchment paper on top, and then I press it with another plate. You don't want to press it super hard. And then you can just form them how you like. See? After I get done forming them, I put them on a plate or in my pan. And then after they cook, all they have to do is get soaked in gravy. Here's what the patties look like when they're done, and I do the hamburger patties the same way without all the spices. Then just grill them up. Okay, so now what I've done is I've cooked up all of the Salisbury steak patties, and I'm gonna use the drippings from that as part of my gravy. Now you don't have to do that, but it does add to the flavor. And it saves you on having to do more cleanup in more pans or more dishes. So what I'm gonna do is add to this about a tablespoon or 2 of bacon fat. I use this because it adds a ton of flavor and it's dairy free. If you don't like the taste of bacon or bacon fat, then you can also use butter or any other type of fat. But you do want to have a fat because it'll add to the flavor and will help with thickening. After I have the fat and it's melted in the pan, I'm gonna add some beef broth, and this is what gives the bulk of the gravy. So I get this from Aldi. It's organic beef broth. You can make your own homemade bone broth, which I do sometimes, but I don't have any on hand right now. And so this is a nice compromise. So on low heat, I'm gonna add this 1 cup of beef broth. And then after it comes to a boil, then I'm gonna add in about 1/4 teaspoon of glucomannan. Now I know that you guys probably won't have this on hand if you're just starting, but this is something that I've used over and over again for gravy, for thickening anything like casseroles. I actually wrote on here with permanent marker, best for gravy, because this and xanthan gum is something that those both can be used for cooking. Now when you add the beef broth in and it comes to a simmer, that's when you'll sprinkle in the glucomannan, and you want to do it like an even coating. You won't see that it'll get thick right away. It'll thicken as it cools mostly, and so don't add too much at once or it'll clump up. I'll have each one of these recipes in the description so that you guys can make this on your own. Now it's just starting to simmer, so I'm gonna add in the glucomannan. And see how I just dust it over the top? I don't want to just clump it all in at once. So that was 1/4 teaspoon. Then you can add in your spices, and then you can take it off the heat. Now you guys can also add like heavy cream to this if you want to make it more of a creamy type texture. I also will be adding in some green onion for flavor, not a lot because it's high in carbs again. But after this warms up a little bit and starts to thicken, I'm gonna take it off the heat and then add in my Salisbury steak patties so that they can soak up all of that gravy. Now, normally you would probably add mushrooms to this. I don't have any mushrooms on hand. So this week I'm just gonna make it without, but you can also slice up mushrooms and add it in at this point for the gravy if you'd like. If the gravy doesn't seem thick enough after you cool it for a little while, then just rewarm it, add a little bit more, and mix it all in. So now I've taken some of these out of the pan and put them in a container so that we can eat them later this week. I just wanted to show you guys after it cools down a little bit how this gravy gets thick. If you can see, this is just with that 1/4 teaspoon. I did not add any extra. Here's the finished product. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll have all of the recipes in the description below, and be sure to check us out on Instagram.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Action 2 News.
But you can add 2, 3 if you're gonna be doubling or making a higher recipe. I'm not.
Basketball.
Oh my word. I gotta show this. Messes happen in the kitchen, don't they? That's what a real chef does.
Okay, did you get that?